close to me, I'm running in the men's gentleman over me, yeah. What is up, you absolute toddler, bot, noobs, scrubs? I will absolutely farm the life of all of you little virgins. I'm only kidding. This video is going to be around my loadouts, 10 of my favorite loadouts that I can utilize in a Darkzone. I finally managed to put it together. I've always been in the Darkzone knowing I've got these items and then I've got one item missing, which is really annoying. So I've grinded my ass out every single day, PvEing, PvPing to get these items, and I finally did it. All 10 of my main builds to utilize both in solo play and in group play, mainly in group play because I feel like playing in groups now is a lot more common than playing in solo. So yeah, I want to sort of run through my loadouts, the best possible 10 loadouts that I've put together. A few of them are very unique, and the others are mainstream and utilized by a lot of the players in the Darkzone. So the first one on the list is Frenzy. This is my favorite build to date. It is my LMG Frenzy pistol build. And the way that I utilize this build is essentially long ranges and very close range with the pistol. The first item that we have is of course a triple max perfect frenzy. If you do the gunner specialization tasks or projects, you will eventually unlock this and you can basically craft it. So I crafted one and maxed out the damage to armor and optimized the LMG damage just to triple max it. The reason why I have the Virginian as my secondary is because if you don't know, in PvP there's a lot of desync. And essentially what happens is when I'm coming across sniper players, which is a big counter to this build, I can essentially body shot them and kill them in one hit. But the way that I do it is when I sit in cover, you get almost 100% accuracy first shot on this particular rifle. So what you want to do is you want to sit in cover, instantly peek cover, shoot body shot, and essentially it would not show your animation of your character peeking, but it will show them dying to a bullet trail. So you want to utilize this to take out snipers instantly peeking from cover, and that would be your way to sort of counter those long range snipers. If people push up, you want to utilize the Regulus for pistol, of course, and then the other elements will speak for themselves. Now, of course, when you're utilizing this build, you want to use the punch drunk mask. You want to maximize your headshot and your pistol damage. So that is the current rolls I have. As for the backpack, I have weapon handling and crit chance with Vigilance. This is 100% recommended. You need at least 2 or 3 weapon handling rolls on this build, otherwise the LMG is not going to reload quickly enough and you're going to struggle to do enough DPS for your team, and you'll be more of a nuisance to them rather than an addition to the team. As for the gloves, very straightforward. Contractor's gloves, they give LMG damage and they're best in class. Rifle damage, again, we can utilize this as the best in class knee pads, but also we have a rifle secondary. And then of course we have the weapon handling holster with the additional crit chance provided by the 2-piece prov. But again, weapon handling, that's my second role. And then my chest piece, I don't have a weapon handling role, but I do have Unbreakable because you are quite squishy and you rely on doing trades, which means your Unbreakable is very likely to proc, which saves your life a lot of the time. But the reason why I have 2 weapon handling roles on this build is because I have weapon handling here. So essentially it brings my stats to an equivalent of almost 60 crit chance, because obviously I'm not really min-maxed on this build at all. 140 headshot damage, 113 critical hit damage on the rifle. These are the stats. On the pistol, these are the stats. But if we go back to the LMG, as you can see, 30 range, but also 30% reload speed bonus, because I've got 20% weapon handling in total. I could have 22, but I'm not min-max. I believe 22 or 21. But also the 10% from my watch gives me 30% reload speed bonus. You can get this higher, but you're likely to not do as much damage as possible, and that is the point of this build. That's pretty much my LMG build. 1.3 million armor. The pistol can 2-tap anyone because it does almost over 1 million damage in terms of crits. But yeah, that's the way I utilize it, with gunner of course, because you need the 50 magazine on the LMG. So, moving on to my second build, which is my SMG Regen build. This is one of my favorites for solo PvP. You can utilize this in a team, but you become a bit of a nuisance if there aren't team buffs. You need coyotes, you need a future healer just to be dishing out more damage. But this as a regen build is one of my best so far. Now, thanks to Crypto, I finally have the Bellstone Backpack, which is triple max, and Adrenaline Rush. I can pretty much roll any talent I want. And just before I run through the full stats, I kind of want to explain why I use Adrenaline Rush with this build and why I use Perfect Intimidate. Of course, you don't have that much damage as a tanky player, so when I have this particular talent active, I basically do 40% amplified damage, which is a lot of the time. And yeah, I'm pretty much utilizing the SMG with it. So just to run you through, this is the solo version of the build. Hazard crit damage on the the mask, the one piece from the SMG. But also we're getting the 1% armor regen here. We're getting the 1% armor regen from the Murakami's Emperor's Guard knee pads, which you can get in the Darkzone, Darkzone only, and of course the 2-piece here. The status effects affects my EMP, duration, and also we get an additional 1% armor regen with crit damage. Now, bear in mind, I've got hazard protection on everything besides the backpack, because that's how it came, but you'd ideally want hazard protection here as well. Bringing you to the stats, we've got almost crit cap, 141 crit damage, 70 headshot damage, and then if we go to the defensive stats, this should be 60 because obviously the backpack has armor regen, but you'd ideally want 60 hazard protection and 55,000 armor regen. So that is the variation of a solo build that I have, which is my favorite to date. It never lets me down, and any SMGs you'd like to use is perfectly fine. You can use this for burst because you can still almost one burst players, but if you want the best recommendation, you want to use either the Lady Death or the MPX/Banshee, depending on which one has the higher rolls. So that is the SMG build that I use for solo PvP with the firewall specialization. Moving on to my third favorite build so far, which is the most toxic build I've made to date. It's been utilized a lot across the Darkzone. A lot of different variations of this build have been going about, but this is my best version of the build and the one I would recommend running if you want to maximize your survivability and damage. So the current stats I have, and bear in mind you can play around with your attributes. You can swap out, armor regen for headshot and all that, but I want to sort of go through the stats first before I get into the build. So my pistol currently has 200 headshot damage because this is the armor regen version. The other version I have on this is 235 headshot damage / 240, I believe, with the Regulus. So this is the main one I run for survivability, because the stats speak for themselves. 60% hazard protection, 67k armor regen. You can also run the 70 hazard protection one, and you can also run the Jarl and get rid of the Providence to have 80% hazard protection, but I've never used that because I feel like I don't do enough damage. I want to sort of 1-tap, 2-tap people with this build rather than 3-4-tap them. So again, your own variations depending on your playstyle. The DNH Punch Drunk Mask needs to have hazard protection. Headshot mod, we've of course got the backpack, Adrenaline Rush, headshot mod with hazard, armor regen. We've got the almost maxed out, which soon would be maxed out, Perfect Intimidate chest piece for the 40% amplified damage. This is almost always active because you're hiding behind your shield. And then we have the Bellstone for the additional armor regen, the second piece for the additional armor regen of the Golan, and of course the Murakami knee pads, which brings us to an all-round ridiculously disgusting overpowered build because the Regulus and the Liberty are completely broken, and until they're fixed, this build will always be one of my strongest builds in the Darkzone for solo and group play. Moving on to one of my favorite AR builds in the game is the crit version of Concussion Unbreakable. The survivability, the ability to dish out so much damage is why I utilize this build, but I've also got the 50 crit version in case someone's using Coyote, so I'll just go through this one for the time being, and it's very, very simple. If you want to go 50 crit AR, you just change 2 of your mods on your gun to crit damage. So, the 60 crit AR version, what do I have, what do I utilize? Currently, my best weapon is the FAL. It dishes out the most amount of damage just after the FAMAS. The FAMAS is by far the highest DPS AR in the game. Unfortunately, it lacks on accuracy on long ranges, so the FAL is where that really exceeds over the FAMAS. If there is another gun that you'd like to utilize, I'd recommend the Carbine 7. As for the EB, of course, that's quite straightforward. When I'm outnumbered, I can utilize the EB to proc Tenacity and 1vx. Again, the pistol on most of my builds is Finisher, so you can utilize that and against skills and gain that 30% crit chance and damage. Just before we get into the pieces, here are the stats. 60 crit chance, almost 150 crit damage, almost 100 headshot damage. Of course, the defensive stats are, 10% 0 armor regen. And the pieces and the rolls that I have are quite straightforward. Crit damage, crit chance with a crit chance mod, headshot crit damage, crit chance with concussion. Best in class contractor's gloves, best in class knee pads, which are called the Fox's Prayer. You can get these in the open world and in the Darkzone. Fenris for the additional AR damage, but of course the Cheska is one of the pieces that you definitely need to get the additional 10% crit chance with Unbreakable Rod. So that is my AR crit build, mainly for outnumbered plays, as in if you've got 3-4 people on you, you can switch the Eagle Bearer and do a lot of bloody damage. And of course the Unbreakable, just to have that additional half-life when your armor procs. Moving on to my other AR build, this is the Spotter AR Vigilance variant. I utilize the Technician spec with the linked laser pointer, which pulses people for a ridiculous amount of time, meaning my spot is always active. But again, it's very similar to my other build. It's got the same stats pretty much, but the talents are very different. So first of all, the spec is different. Technician, so I can have the laser pointer on the FAL. You can also utilize this on the ACR or the carbine, etc. I've got Spotter rolled on my Cheska Viroba SRO, which makes absolutely no sense. Why don't you just call it Cheska Viroba? Spotter chest piece, which gives me 15% amplified damage, and of course Vigilance as well. Again, best in class contractors, Fox's Prayer, and Fenris. The overall stats are almost 60% because I've got 0.6 missing on my chest piece, but almost 100 headshot and 141 crit damage. Again, the stats here are going to be zeroed out and 10% on the watch. That is my high damage AR version of my AR build in general. You want to utilize this in a team. Solo play, I wouldn't recommend it. I just don't like it in solo play because you don't really have a medkit to rely on. It's just an instant medkit and that's it. But again, this in a team is very, very effective with the shield to proc in sync and the decoy to hide yourself in plain sight. So yeah, that's my spotter version of the AR build, and it's very common. Moving on to the sixth build I have here is the Regen shotgun build. Let's quickly equip that so I can run through the stats. Very different to my SMG build. I know it has sort of the similar roles, but it utilizes the pistol more than anything when it comes to, a sort of life and death situation. So the primary shotgun we have is the Collaborate, because we don't have the Firewall Shield to proc in sync, but we do have in sync here in case you didn't want to utilize the Collaborate and you don't have it. But I use a Collaborate because it is the most reliable shotgun in the game. 30% reload speed here. The additional 20% here and the 10% from my watch means I have 60% reload speed on this shotgun, which is ridiculously high for a shotgun, which we all know does a lot of damage. Again, Regulus is one of the best pistols in the game. I say one of the best because Liberty is almost on par with it if you can utilize a Liberty a lot better with the RPM. But right now, just with the passive that this gun has, dealing 400% weapon damage to surrounding enemies and makes them bleed, is awesome, and I definitely recommend getting this from the raid. If you don't have any of these pistols, you can utilize the Deagle. I would highly advise using the Desert Eagle with Finisher, so you can get that additional damage when you down someone and full kill them with a pistol. As for the rolls, Punch Drunk Mask with crit damage, crit chance. The backpack, again, Bellstone with regen, crit damage, Adrenaline Rush. We have Perfect Intimidate chest piece with reasonable rolls on the crit damage, but almost triple max with Hazard. We have the Golan with Hazard crit damage. We have the Cheska with Hazard crit damage, and we have the Murakami with, of course, the armor regen crit damage. So the overall stats that we have here are basically 48%, 108 crit damage, and a reasonable amount of headshot. On the pistol, we have almost 40% crit chance with 150 headshot. So this build is super, super tanky. You don't really need to rely on a medkit, because on the regen side, we've got 60,000 regen, which is very, very effective. You can go higher hazard and scale out some crit damage or armor regen, but I like running it like this, because if I get foamed, I could just pull out my shield and shit on the guy who's just foamed me, so I don't really have a problem with that. But that is the shotgun solo regen. I would not recommend using this in a team. This is primarily for solo. Of course, you can use it in a team to kind of enforce the fight, because you've got the firewall medkit. But that's the reason why I'm utilizing this version and this variation of the build. I don't like to use anything other than Firewall because I've got the Collaborate and I don't need to rely on the Gunner spec to give me the additional 50% reload speed every 3 reloads. Moving on to the next build, which is a full Hasbro SMG build. This was very, very common on the release of TU10, I believe, because Adrenaline Rush was one of those talents that came out. You know, everyone wants to utilize sort of Intimidate. So this is the hazard variation of the build that I have. I can play around with my blue mods because I'm currently sitting at 90% hazard protection. But as you can see, I've got almost 100% burn res, which basically is full immunity anyway. But once I optimize, that'll be 90, that'll be 100. And I swap my mods around depending on what the server uses. And that's just done by blue mods. So right here, I've got my 10% burn res. If I come across a server who are utilizing Sadist with Wicked, I'll just pop on one additional bleed mod, and I'll be completely immune to all the additional damage buffs they get and the bleed completely. So you want to utilize this primarily in group, but you can also utilize this in solo play because a lot of people rely on sticky EMPs, they rely on foam, etc. You're tanky enough and you dish out enough damage to be able to sort of advance through those broken mechanics that we have and skills that we have in the game that people obviously abuse, like foam, etc. And I'm a factor of that. I abuse foam as well because other people abuse it on me. And yeah, that pretty much counters all of that shit for you because you're completely immune to foam. Again, with the pieces, it'll be Hasbro crit damage on every single piece. Hasbro, I have headshot here, which is unfortunate, but it's the best backpack I have. As you can see, almost triple max. Again, Hasbro. You want the 2-piece Cheska for the additional has protection. You want the Jarl chest piece, or whatever you want to do in terms of variation and different items that you have. But this is the one I have, which is the best chest piece that I have probably to date on Jarl, with Intimidate for the additional 35% multiplicative damage. Of course, this works with this. We all know that. And you need those two talents. Cheska again for the additional hazard protection and crit damage, crit chance, sorry, and the Grupo for the additional crit damage. So yeah, we dish out a lot of damage with this build. It's quite strong, almost crit capped, 146 crit damage, 80 headshot. This would be 156 or probably 158 if I didn't have the headshot roll. Again, 90% resistance is the best that you can ask for in this game. And once I fully optimize this, I'll probably run with less crit damage and just make myself completely immune to bleed, fire, and of course disrupt, of course EMPs. So yeah, that's my Hasbro Regen, not my Regen, but sorry, my Hasbro build that I utilize in teams if it gets a bit too cock up, and yeah, we need a bit more sustain, so that's what I'll run. Moving on to the next build, we have the Enforcer build, which is very popular to myself, not to anyone else. I made this build quite a while about, and I've basically just altered it and changed it up. This is the build that I use to push for my teammates. It utilizes high armor with high DPS and high survivability, and I'll get to the DPS in a bit. I use the Banshee, of course, I use the shotgun. Now, I'll tell you why I use the shotgun and the SMG, because I'm utilizing the talent Versatile. This is probably the most slept on talent in the game, but people forget that you gain, it's not 35%, it's 25%. They still haven't changed it because they're lazy. Which is why my name is Devs Don't Play and Devs Don't Care, because they don't give a shit. But just to get into it a little further, Versatile gives me 25% amplified damage on my SMG or shotgun when I swap to it for 10 seconds, so it's a lot of time. I utilize that backpack, of course. I've got Badger Tough for the shotgun damage. I've got my SMG mask with these rolls. I've got Unbreakable with hazard protection crit damage. Unbreakable, of course, if I'm pushing for my teammates with a final med kit, this is what I want to be utilizing in case they break my armor, which in most cases they will. But I've also got some survivability and regen here as well. So these are the 3 survivability pieces I have. I've got Bellstone, which is the armor regen. I've got Murakamis with armor regen. And of course, skill duration affects my EMP. I've also got the Jarl piece as well for the additional hazard protection. The overall stats on this build is 60% crit chance, 116 crit damage, 37, 116 on the shotgun, and of course the pistol speaks for itself, but the survivability element, 41,000 regen, 70 hazard protection. I still do a lot of damage with this build, especially if I'm hitting headshots, which in most cases players won't be aiming for, they'll be aiming for body shot, but I've got max armor, so my shield is pretty much maxed out, and of course I use Firewall, because I'm in front, and when I'm in front, I'm highlighting teammates, and the people that stand behind me gain 12% per highlighted enemy, which can go all the way up to, I don't know what number, but a lot. That is the Enforcer build. Moving on to the second to last SMG plus AR build that I have here. I've utilized this quite a bit in solo and group play, especially when I want to give my team Coyote's buff. But I'm going to explain this build a bit further because I don't think people utilize the talent Versatile and Unbreakable as much as they should be. Because I feel like a lot of people have ARs and rely on just range fights, etc. But this is a mixture of both, and I'll get into this a little further. The SMG that I have is my Burst SMG, which is the Vector SPR45 ACP. You can use a tactical on this as well. I would not use the 9mm. This SMG variant is not strong at all. It's got more magazine than everything, but the burst damage is ridiculously low. As you can see here, I've got an 11.7 SMG damage roll. I've got higher here on this SMG, and this SMG does almost 10,000 more damage than this. So yeah, speaking of that, don't utilize it. But as you can see, this SMG has 6 more bullets, but also has very similar damage to this SMG. But again, this tactical will always have higher burst damage in all of them. I use, of course, the Eagle Bearer as my secondary to do damage from range. I've got my Fenris for my assault rifle damage, but I've also got Versatile. So when I push up front, I switch to my SMG. When I'm from range and I need to do some burst damage with my AR, I again immediately gain 10% multiplicative damage with my assault rifle. So that's how I utilize the build. I also have Coyote's Mask, but I'll get into the stats later to explain why I'm utilizing this. Unbreakable with the Cheska chest piece, SMG again holster for my 10% SMG damage, and best in class knee pads, best in class contractor's gloves. Now, how do I utilize this build? Close range, I'm almost crit cap, so I'll be doing a lot of damage. I can burst anyone with any armor. I can burst any shield in one clip. But of course, I've got the Coyote's Mask, which is why my assault rifle is on 48%. So I gain an additional 10% when I'm utilizing my AR with Coyotes, which means it puts me to 58 and almost crit caps me. But that is essentially the way I run this build. I would advise using the Eagle Bearer because if you do get outnumbered and sometimes you don't have Versatile active, you can just switch to EB and do a crazy amount of damage. So that is my AR plus SMG build that I've made and I've been utilizing for a bit now. The final and 10th build that I have in my loadout is the Coyote AR variation. Quickly to get into the stats, I'm crit capped when I'm utilizing Coyote's Mask, so I'll be at 58%. I say crit capped, but obviously there's 2% missing. A reasonable amount of headshot damage with 100%, but I've also got a lot of body shot damage as well. And you want to utilize body shot as much as possible. Now, I've been using my headshot build for a while, which has 176 headshot damage on my EB, but I lack so much when I'm coming across players who use shields against me because they can body shot me and I just don't take their shield down fast enough. Especially when big shield players come with a pistol. If you're running a headshot only build, this is where you're going to really get out damaged and outplayed because they can basically just body shot you to death and you can't break their shield in time. So the variation of this is primarily for team play, of course with the Coyote buffs, but I can also take down big shields with almost half a clip slash 70 to 80% on a max armor bulwark shield. Again, my Eagle Bearer is the same, 48%, and of course we've got the pistol that speaks for itself. As for the stats and the way that it obviously combines, I'm using like Coyote's Mask. The backpack is going to be Vigilance because this just dishes out so much damage. Best in class Contractors Foxes, Fenris. Again, you see a lot of these on my AR builds, but again, Unbreakable with the additional headshot damage provided by the Providence. So this is my best chess piece so far. I can change it to any talent that I want, but if you don't have this chess piece, I'd highly advise utilizing Grupo instead of Providence for the additional body shot damage, which will bring you to 85 headshot damage and it'll bring you to 175 crit damage. So that is my final build for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. A lot of these builds are quite mainstream and utilized by a lot of streamers and players in general, but there's also the unique Enforcer / Virgin builds. There's the survivability builds in there that people don't know about and people should be using. So those are my top 10 builds. I hope you guys learned something. If you're a new player, smash that subscribe button and I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you for watching.